So I plan on making a bigger video about this, but I just need to talk about how much data centers are freaking me out. And it's for reasons that I think most people will come to expect, but there are a few things that I think are being a bit slept on. If you haven't been on the planet for the last good while, I'll just give you a quick and dirty definition of what a data center is. All they really are just complexes that hold any information associated with the internet or computing or that sort of thing. But more recently, larger complexes have been starting to be constructed, and these ones are being primarily used for AI learning, and these are the facilities that are scaring me. Now, data centers have been facing a lot of scrutiny on the basis of the environment and health. Environmentally, they are drawing absorbent amounts of electricity and water, which is contributing to an awful amount of pollution. People's drinking water is turning black, essentially, near these data centers. And then health-wise, there have been recent studies on infrasound, which is a sound that we can't hear, but it still affects us and our health. And something that has been believed to have caused infrasound are windmills, and people who live around windmills and now who are people who are living around data centers are experiencing nausea, anxiety, headaches, that sort of thing. And while those are justifiable things to get angry at data centers for, I think there are two other things that need to be talked about at the same level. And the first pertains to the secrecy behind data centers and what's going on behind the scenes. And one example of this I find to set a very dangerous precedent is the fact that these data centers are using NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to sort of get what they want. When a company decides on a location to build a data center, they will oftentimes ask a town or city's officials to sign a non-disclosure agreement before construction can begin. And what's freaky is these NDAs will restrict the public's or even sometimes the officials' ability to understand exactly what's going on in these centers, such as how much electricity they are consuming, how much water they're consuming, that kind of thing. And if you are going to, let's say you are somebody who is allowing one of these centers to come in, wouldn't you want to know how much water in particular or how much electricity is going to be consumed by this facility before it's allowed to be built? Especially at a time where our nation's reservoirs are being depleted to levels never before seen. And these are water systems that provide water to tens of millions of Americans. So due to what is at stake here, it is incredibly frightening that these companies and these facilities can get away with not telling the public or their officials or the representatives what is truly going on. And that is something that can be done across the board. You name it, with whatever facility or what company you want. It is setting the precedent that as a company, we can do what we want and we don't need to tell you anything. Or at the very least, we can keep out some very key details that might inhibit you from allowing one of these facilities to be built in your town or city. Now, the other thing that I don't really think is being talked about as much as it should be is the national security risks that these data centers propose. So, a few weeks ago, I saw a story about how a power line outside Washington, D.C. collapsed. Now, normally, it would only take a few minutes or even seconds. It's a very quick response time for the grid to react and administer power back in those regions. However, what actually happened is the grid took over 10 minutes to respond because a nearby data center disconnected itself from the grid because of what happened to that power line. Now, even though that event in particular didn't cause a blackout, it did still cause people's lights in that region to flicker. And let's just say it was a larger event. What would have happened? For sake of conversation, let's say that multiple power lines went down in a certain region, which caused multiple data centers to trip. Would the grid collapse in that area? I sure hope not, but seeing how apparently fragile the grid is, I don't see why it wouldn't. And God forbid there is a concerted effort where multiple power stations or multiple power lines across the country go down, which affect multiple data centers, which affect tens of millions of Americans, maybe even hundreds of millions. What's going to happen? Like, these are things that need to be dealt with adequately and efficiently, or else there could be a massive power issue on our hands. And this is just scratching the surface of it. I'm gonna make a bigger, more in-depth video on this kind of thing. Plenty of people also made plenty of videos on this thing, but it needs to be talked about more. That's it.